Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record the meeting, providing that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware of. None. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, should members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Welcome to all those in attendance. Now I'll ask Mr. Bishop to introduce the officers for this meeting.
Morning, Chairman. Members, my name is Kevin Bishop. I'm the lead development manager of Planning Services. We have 3 items on the agenda today for you. Item number 6, Lower Moswick Farm Storage. Josh Bailey to my right will present. Item number 7, the Pavilion, Castle Green, Southern Rails will be joining us. And item number 8, Landry, Goodrich, Josh Evans will join us. Thank you, Chairman. And in addition, we have Kerry Monroe, the legal advisor to the committee online, and Jill Tukey Williams, the highways officer as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, for item 1, apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Sebastian Burling, Anne Marie Probert and Yolandi Watson. Local member Councillor Chand was also provided apologies. Item 2, we have the following substitutes: Councillor John Stone for Councillor Probert, Councillor William Wilding for Councillor Watson, and Councillor Graham Jones for Councillor Burke. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask that you indicate if you wish to declare an interest, and I will call each councillor in turn. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest? Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. In item 8, I'm a member of the AOMB committee. So declare that non-pecuniary.
Any other declarations of interest? No. Then we'll move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of October. And no matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Can I ask members to raise their hands to indicate if they are for or against? For. Against? Abstain?
I wasn't here, Chairman.
Yeah, for those members. Abstain for those members who are not there. There are no chairman's announcements. I'll move on to. Can I now request the public speakers for the first item, number 6, which application. Mr. Fry, the applicant's agent, please take his seat in the public gallery. My welcome to this meeting. I'll call you to speak following the officer's presentation on the application. The application concerns us is Lower Moswick Farm, Birchwood Lane Storage, Herefordshire. Mr. Josh Bailey will make the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Very good morning to everybody. The application site lies approximately 0.2 miles southeast of Longley Green, close to the county border with Worcestershire and within the Malvern Hills AOMB. Accessed via a private stone track, the application site comprises a brickwork cottage and traditional timber frame threshing barn and is located by the red star on screen. And the next slide, please. This application for members seeks full planning permission for the proposed conversion of the brickwork cottage and the adjoining threshing barn for use by a mental wellbeing charity to provide support to emergency services and military personnel. The charity will operate a retreat program from these buildings, with sessions run on combating burnout and mental health resilience. Surrounding land uses consists of agricultural grazing land and associated buildings, with the settlement of Longley Green nearby, as you can see on the block plan. First, the area below. In assessing the principal development, members are directed to policy RA5 of the Council's core strategy, which relates to the reuse of rural buildings, and this is repeated vertebrae under section 6.6 of the officer's report. And the next slide, please, which is the submitted location plan. And the next slide, which is the proposed block plan. And the next slide, which is some photographs of the access to the site, which you'll be able to see it's a private stone track. And the buildings themselves, you can see in the top left photo and the bottom right photo. And the next slide, which is a number of photographs of the threshing barn, which is structurally sound, and works to this building would include an extension on the footprint of a part of the barn which has been previously demolished. It is clear from the western elevation, historic mapping, and remaining walls and site that there previously was a structure at this location. I'll just leave notes a second to take these photographs. And the next slide, please. This building will provide the main base for the charity, providing a conference room, meeting rooms, and breakout space for activities, toilets, as well as kitchen facility. It would be converted to be in keeping with the surrounding landscape and environment, and will be of traditional timber frame, whilst incorporating a modern finish to enhance the building's visual appearance. And the next slide, please. Of which adjacent to the threshing barn is the brick cottage, which was last occupied as a residential dwelling back to the 1960s. It has since been unmaintained and become dilapidated, to the point this year where the building experiences significant damage. Most recently, all fertility photographs were taken. Actually, let me just take that in for a second. And the next slide, please. In which the proposed works here will involve the cottage being taken down and rebuilt, utilising the existing timber members and brickwork to ensure it is visually consistent with the site, and will be utilised for offices as well as staff break room and toilet facilities. Both buildings are considered to have some historic value as they are early buildings of traditional construction, particularly the stone threshing barn with its timber frame indicating a probable 17th century date, and the site also appears on 19th century maps. The proposed design reflects the agricultural character of the buildings and the materials necessary to form part of the proposed development, which is sympathetic and complementary to the existing buildings and the surrounding area. Buildings' rural design, scale, and material selection takes inspiration from existing buildings, but provides a contemporary twist. The proposed development picks up on the important features and characteristics of the surrounding area. Through amendments between the applicant, your officers, and the Council Building Conservation Officer, the proposed designs are now considered sensitive and retain the traditional characteristics of the agricultural barns and historic farmstead. Sustainability measures which will help convert the proposals into low energy buildings will be taking a fabric first approach using high performance insulation. And it is proposed to incorporate a ground source heat pump. As members will have seen on the photographs, whilst the threshing barn is structurally sound and capable of conversion, our cottage certainly does necessitate rebuilding works. And in this instance, the proposal would not be compliant with the adopted development plan, as the building would not be capable of conversion unless a considerable amount of rebuilding to the cottage is undertaken. Therefore, establishing potential with policy R5(4) of the council's core strategy. However, this does need to be balanced against the identified public benefits. The buildings would provide a base for a mental wellbeing charity for ambulance service and military personnel. Members will note that Herefordshire Council is a signatory of the Herefordshire Armed Forces community and coordinates a cross-sector civilian military task group, whose role is to deliver the aims of this covenant. And this includes addressing the needs of the armed forces community across the county. The need to provide accommodation and other services to ex-service personnel recognised nationally and also the armed service content. Herefordshire impact assessment as a company submission, and whilst not listed, both buildings are considered to have some local heritage value. The layout of site will remain unaltered, but the key characteristics of the working relationship between the former working barns, courtyard, and cottage being retained. The site has been vacant since the early 1990s, and there is a risk of further decline and potential complete loss as encountered with the recent collapse of the cottage that members will have seen on the photographs. And it is considered that the proposal supports the long-term conservation of these heritage assets, reducing the risk of their loss. The proposed use will continue alongside existing farming activities, and the continued agricultural use of the wider site will ensure the character of the area is conserved through ongoing maintenance and management of the holding. It is considered that the proposal is compatible with adjoining neighbouring uses and not adversely impact residential amenity of adjoining properties in line with policy SE1 of the core strategy, consistent with paragraphs 130 and 185 of the NPF having regard to cumulative impacts. And the next slide, in which members will be mindful of paragraph 176 of the NPF, which advises that great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty, particularly in AOMBs, which has the highest status of protection in relation to these issues. The application has been supported by a detailed landscape and visual impact assessment. The site is a well-established farmstead, and this is an important component of an attractive and historic landscape. The assessment concludes that the proposed will fulfill recognised management objectives for this landscape character area, providing visual, cultural and biodiversity benefits. Integrated within the courtyard created by the Barton Cottage will be a formalised seating area surrounding coastal landscaping, and members can see on the proposed site on screen. This area is ideally located as being south facing, benefiting from direct sunlight. The wider setting and surrounding landscape is characterised by trees, hedgerows and permanent pasture fields. And next slide, please. Of which there are a number of photographs also of the site and surrounding public rights of way. The open field setting to the north will be retained without the introduction of fencing, signs or other paraphernalia. The existing hedgerows around the site will be retained and enhanced, and the existing trees to the south are to be retained. The development is considered to have a very low landscape impact, and the impact further mitigated through utilisation of the farmyard as the main car park. In concurring with the use of council's landscape option, it's considered the application proposals are in accordance with core traffic policy LD1, section 15 of the NPF, and policy CND5 of the Bradley neighbourhood development plan. While there will be some change to the landscape character and alterations to use of the site, the use and appearance can be suitably integrated from the novel track in the wider setting. The proposal would reinforce the agricultural character of buildings and provide a modest enhancement to its landscape setting. And the next slide, please. In which access arrangements onto the public highway are to remain unaltered, and parking, as you can see on the car park drainage layout, is immediately adjacent to the existing agricultural buildings at Lower Mowbray Farm and approximately 0.15 miles north of the two buildings under consideration. The existing access track to the farmyards and buildings can transport anyone there with limited mobility. The council's highway area engineer has raised no objections to the proposal, and the proposal provides an appropriate strategy in terms of vehicle movements in accordance with policy NT1 of the strategy. And the next slide, please, which just gives a couple of photos of the existing access into the site itself, with the parking area in the top left, bottom left, and then the corner from the highway going up into the site itself. And the next slide, which is then going back then towards the public highway, Birchwood Lane. As you can see there, the photograph on the right and bottom left. And the next slide, please. In which the enhancements and recommendations are set out in the ecology report will be implemented in full and conditioned at the request of the council's ecologist, who raised no objections. It is clear from the ecology report and the landscape visual impact assessment that the proposal will provide significant betterment for the site in ecological terms, and is compliant with policy LD2 and LD3 of the core strategy. Enhancements to the land will be seen in the short term through the works proposed within this application, but also in the long term, as in addition to maintenance carried out at the farm, the mental wellbeing charity has focused on biodiversity. Pile drainage will be served by a package treatment plant and surface water dealt with by an appropriately designed soakaway system in accordance with policies SD3 and SD4 of the core strategy. Members will note within the agenda item report that the land drainage engineer has commented and confirmed no objections to this proposed development. The proposed design respects and provides a modest enhancement of the landscape character of the locality, retaining the heritage value of the buildings. The buildings in their current state are not able to be utilised for any practical use, and thus the code represents the most viable option for the long-term conservation and enhancement of these assets. The proposal incorporates appropriate provision for protecting priority species, which is incorporated into the submitted ecology report, and the proposal is compatible with the surrounding agricultural use and without no effects on the agricultural operations of most of the farm. Exclusive proposal would call policy RA5 in terms of 1, 2, 3, and 5. As members will have seen, the proposal requires significant work to Hart Cottage, which would conflict with policy RA54, and this does therefore need to be considered in the plan balance. And with reflection of other policies within the development plan, if there are any significant social, environmental, and economic benefits, the scheme has result in material consideration as a whole, which can have considerable clouds in the plan balance to make an informed assessment and recommendation. Paragraph 92 of the NPPF identifies that planning policies and decisions should aim to achieve healthy, inclusive, and safe spaces which promote social interaction, including opportunities for meetings between people who might not otherwise come into contact with each other. Heritage assets also bring economic benefits, as heritage, while preserving the historic environment, is a major factor in the county's quality of life. The sustainable reuse of the cottage and Fretton barn, and the desirability of enhancing the significance of heritage assets and putting them to viable uses consistent with their conservation without leaving to total loss should also be afforded weight in the plan balance. The proposal would provide opportunities for emergency service and military personnel to receive support and training in mental resilience for a programme that encourages the learning of new skills and hobbies to benefit participants in the long term. Members are drawn to section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, which states as follows. If regarded as part of the development plan for the purpose of any determination to be made under the Planning Act, the determination must be made in accordance with the plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Members will see that there are material considerations weighing in favour of the scheme, which would tip the balance in favour of support. This would, of course, mean taking a decision which represents a departure from the development plan and why this application has been brought before you this morning. However, it would reiterate the Council's continued commitment to addressing the needs of the armed forces and support opportunities for such personnel and emergency personnel, and consider heritage assets of local value, which is considered to outweigh the quality tension with policy RA54 or strategy. The scheme is acceptable in whatever respects citing this quality tension, and accordingly, the application is recommended for approval as set out in the notice of Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Billy. And now I invite Mr. Fry to make a presentation on behalf of the applicant, the applicant's agent, I think he is. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Fry.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. So this application is for the renovation of two traditional farm buildings at Moswick Farm, which will form the base for Reset, a charity focused on promoting and protecting the physical and mental health of serving former members of the emergency services, medical and nursing professionals, and the armed forces. The charity is registered with the Charity Commission. Prior to the submission of the full planning application, a detailed pre-application inquiry was undertaken, which informed this submission, and there's been close cooperation with the planning department and statutory consultees throughout the design phase and the application process. The proposal is for the restoration of Harp Cottage in order to create a meeting room and office space for the team managing Reset. Also proposed is the restoration, conversion and extension of the timber frame threshing barn to create a conference hall, kitchen and canteen facilities, toilet facilities, an office and a meeting room, which will be used as the main hub for visitors to the site and participants of the courses run there. An integral part of this project is to provide a base for a charity in a tranquil rural location, which is close to nature. To maximise the benefits of these buildings and location, it's essential to the charity that the proposal enhances the biodiversity value of the site and ensures the buildings are well integrated into the wider landscape setting, whilst making the most of the heritage value of the existing buildings. Reset builds the mental and physical resilience of frontline staff and their organisations by offering the chance to stop, pause, reset and recharge in nature. Their ethos is founded on prevention, not treatment. The charity was established in 2019 by 2 friends, a counter-terrorism police officer and an intensive care unit doctor. The need for the charity was identified over several years of their lived experiences and bearing witnesses to the challenges faced by their friends and colleagues. The cross-sector experience is a cornerstone of everything they do. The lessons drawn from their experience helps give strength, manage stress, and builds mental and physical resilience in participants of the programme. The charity has made significant progress already. They've held 2 charitable retreats in recent months, one for the senior leadership team of the West Midlands Ambulance Service and one for 35 members of the West Mercia Police. They're now connected with the Royal Foundation and are being approached for more support from the emergency services. No objections have been raised, and the significant support for the proposal received from your officers highlights the many benefits it would bring about. The proposal represents the opportunity for Reset to extend its offer more widely on a permanent basis. The importance of the work they do cannot be understated. The landscape and ecology enhancements, along with the preservation of the county's built heritage, are just a few of the physical benefits which would be brought forward by the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. If you could kindly take your place back in the public gallery. Councillor Chance is the ward member for this area, and she has given her apologies for the meeting, but has provided a written statement which the clerk will read to the meeting. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm saying on behalf of Councillor Chance, Councillor Bishop, Sproom and Cradley. Colleagues, please accept my apologies for not being with you today due to my prior teaching commitments. I have asked this application to be considered by committee because it raises an important planning policy issue. The application is for the proposed conversion of 2 redundant rural buildings to a conference hall and offices for charity use. namely a newly established mental wellbeing charity intended to provide support to emergency services and military personnel. The planning officer is of the view that the proposed amount of rebuilding works required to facilitate the proposal, particularly for one building which has experienced a significant collapse in recent months, would not accord with the principles of policy RA5 of the Council's core strategy. However, given the Council's signing of the Herefordshire Armed Forces Covenant, the officer has judged that this represents a material consideration by way of social benefits, which in his judgment would outweigh this policy conflict. The officer has therefore recommended departing from the development plan and recommends approval. Given that going against our own planning policy would be entirely based on the anticipated social benefits of the development, I suggest that it would be appropriate, indeed essential, to place a condition on the development to ensure the ongoing provision of such social benefits. This would avoid any risk or perception of such development, contrary to planning policy, turning out to be for private benefits. So my request to the committee is simple. If you decide to approve this application, please make approval conditional on provision of the specified social benefits in perpetuity. Thank you for consideration of this matter.
Thank you. And now I invite debate. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just one very quick point, if I may, to pick up with Mr. Bailey. You stated on your briefing it was for ambulance service personnel and armed forces. Can you just clarify this for the whole blue light sector that this application would cover?
Double check when I come back in a couple
Yeah,
of
sure.
minutes, is that all right?
Any other? Persons?
Thank you.
Sorry. Oh, Councillor Davis.
Sorry. Yes, as I actually visited the site, I thought it was actually ideal for the purpose that has been put forward. As no hedges are going to be taken down, it's a very rural area, and it would be drastic if the farm was allowed to be just totally obliterated through the years. It's a nice entrance into it, a long pathway up to it, and I would definitely support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Norman.
Yes, very, very happy to support this. As far as I can gather, the benefits will clearly outweigh the possible disadvantages or technical disadvantages. It does seem to have economic, environmental, and the social health benefits that have been outlined to us. I also very much like the idea that it's kind of getting ahead of problems and trying to anticipate and resolve them early. It sort of echoes some of what's happening with the Cart Shed, which I think we all know is a very successful charity, also supporting among others service people. But this does seem to be sort of that business of trying to anticipate and help people build up resilience and so on, which I think is great. And clearly this kind of activity can only take place in a rural area. So, you know, that sort of makes a lot of sense. You can't really expect it to be as successful and useful in an urban area. Plus, as we've heard, it's also going to ensure the conservation of these rather fine-looking or potentially fine-looking buildings. So I think there's lots of advantages to it. I think the board member made a very good point. Let's ensure that this wonderful sounding use of the development continues. I think we've all been taken for a ride, if you like, in the past, where we've been told that something is going to happen, and then a few years later, something changes, and it's not quite what we thought. Anyway, this does sound genuinely a really useful and worthwhile development, and I'm very happy to support it.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. No, hopefully you can all hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, very good application, and I support this wholeheartedly, to be honest. I propose that we actually go with approval with the condition that the local member has come up with. The only thing I'd like to comment on, because they're going to spend a lot of money on this building, would be if they could do something for grey water harvesting. I think that'd be an important thing, is obviously keeping the place going. That's the only thing I could say, to be honest.
Thank you, councillor. Is that a proposal?
It is.
Of the officer's recommendation. Is that seconded? You take your. Councillor Hudson, sorry. All right. Are there any other, councillor Rowe?
A couple of things. First of all, the proposal was with the local members' recommendation, was it?
Yes,
Yes.
For this to be in perpetuity?
yes,
I think that might be a little bit, this is a superb project, and I'm glad that councillor Davis was able to go there yesterday and have a look. And give her informed opinions, which is marvellous, which we could have gone and had a look at it. I think the size of it, bringing these buildings back to life, I mean, I always make notes as going on, beautiful buildings, wonderful project, and the end use could not be more important. I think it's a little bit big brother, that's to say, after investing all this money and considering the need, we're now telling you that you've got to carry on doing this, otherwise you can't use the buildings. I mean, if that's the intention of the project, and that is where the money is coming from a source that is obviously hand in hand with the project, who knows where funding is going to be in 5 or 10 years' time. It would be extremely unfair to hog tie this charity that if it push come to shove, you can't do anything with it, it's got to be for this social need, this benefit. I think that's a little bit unfair. We're talking of probably hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not moving into 7-figure project here. So I don't think we should be telling them what they should be doing with the building. They've already told us as part of the application. And for them to go into such detail, and this is such a niche project for the end use of the building, that they've done an awful lot of work. We heard who the originators were for this project. They are time served and experienced. I think they know what they're doing. I would very much like to back this project as per the officer's recommendation. I don't see it's our job really to tell people what they should be doing in the future with a big investment site like this. They're the professionals, they know what they're doing, they know what they want to aim for. I think we should trust to them, and I agree with Councillor Norman. Previously, we have had issues that have gone over our heads, and maybe we looked at each other afterwards and thought that wasn't quite what we're doing. I don't see that with this. We're on about medical professionals, we're on about security professionals who have served this country, listening to the description from the officer. And I would trust to them. I wouldn't want to be putting any conditions of use forever, otherwise you can't use the place. So that's where I stand on it.
Can I just remind members that if you look at the officer's recommendation on page 46, number 3, that is fully covered by this. Bearing in mind that the enormous cost that is going to be incurred in this development, it is from charitable and donated public funds. And I think that if you look at 3, this permission shall ensure that for the benefit of charity reset only, and not for the benefit of the land or any other person's interest in the land. It would be unfortunate if we put in the charitable funds and voluntary funds, people making donations to this, that the only beneficiary in the medium term, even as well as the long term, would be private landowners, etc. So that is covered actually in the recommendation.
Chair, can they not come back? They did need to make.
Oh yes, I have been involved where a charity had an asset and it was no longer boots for the poor, hot little boots for the poor of a particular parish, and there weren't any young people there that were no boots.
yeah, just to come back on that, Chair. Obviously, in the past section, I think 106 agreements we all had changed and things taken off. So I think that could come back at any time, and if they need to, and then I think people will be sympathetic if they needed to do that, because we don't want the building going. If they spent all this money, like Councillor Owen was saying, we don't want it something suddenly going back and go into disrepair. or anything like that. So I think it's a good judgment. I go by what the officer's done in the report and everything else, but I'll let that for members to consider.
Okay. So, is he amended this? You haven't amended your proposal?
No.
Okay.
Unless
Harry. Councillor Milne.
Yes, thank you. I was simply going to say that should we be faced with a change of use application in a few years' time, and the charity has decided that it isn't viable or whatever reason, there's a domestic conversion, it would am I right in thinking be measured against SC1? So we would then be looking at the loss of community and social facilities, and clearly by then it would be established as such. That'd be a reasonable supposition. So that looking at the development managed to confirm that in such a circumstance, SC1 would be engaged.
It would, yeah, so, Chairman, yes, it would, or any subsequent policy, because obviously by the time if that happens in the future, it will be under a different development plan that you would be assessing it under, and in this, however, we have the condition which is on there, which the applicants are happy with. They haven't come back to us and said they're unhappy with that. In fact, they've emailed in to say they congratulated the officer on the quality of the report, and so they are happy with the conditions and with etc. which are then on the paper. So it would be subject to, if they did come back in at a later date, it will be subject to full review again. And just to confirm as well, it does cover the blue light services for the to answer that.
And NHS work as well.
Yes, covered, yeah.
There are quite a number of these projects in the county and nationally. There are an enormous number of them. So, Councillor Milne.
I also just wanted to say, if I may, that looking through the exchange between the Buildings Officer Andrew Brislane and subsequently Nick Joyce, I have to say they've worked incredibly hard and with great professionalism and skill to negotiate with the applicant to try, in spite of the fact that these are non-designated heritage assets, to do their very best for these buildings. I mean, the little cottage, a little two-bay cottage, which actually is timber frame, not purely, it's only brick knobbed, is well, I mean, I was interested in trying to really drill down on the conflict with RA5. And yes, sadly, with the deterioration of that building in the last few months, in spite of what the applicant's agent was saying, he was using the words restoration and renovation. It is pretty much into a rebuilding job. Conservation officer was suggesting, well, can we put in a condition to ask for a schedule and method statement to try and recover and use as many of the materials as possible so that it isn't a purely new building. I don't know to what extent that is practical, but I do admire the end result. I think that including the proposal drawing for that building is a good one, and it respects the proportions, materiality, form, fenestration of the original cottage very well. So I just wanted to compliment the HBO on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no one else indicating wishing to speak. Can I now move to a vote on this? We have a sorry. Councillor Challenge is not present for summing up, so perhaps
Yeah, just to cover the point that Councillor Milne has just raised about recording, etc. It's covered by condition number 7, which is within the report. So we've actually got that covered for a timber frame survey to be submitted prior to works. So that's all covered as parcel of that. Again, good debate around all the issues. You pick up the fact that it is, whilst it's going to restoration, it is actually raised to the ground and back up again. That's been taken all into the planning balance. You've accepted that. You've identified the conflict, but taken that on board. And I'm happy for members to move forward.
Okay, thank you. There was a point that Councillor Jones mentioned.
Hopefully, like we've covered that.
Oh, we covered that, yes, yeah, that's right. Right, we have a proposer, a second, for Mr. Dickover, motion. Those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous, so I don't need to ask for any votes. We'll now move on very quickly with the second application, number 7. Yeah, okay. I think Councillor Milne, you're required to be.
You want me to move up?
Yeah.
Up front, do you? Okay.
This is tradition, you know, we can.
Yeah, I'll just-
Yes. Going back to the 16th century.
You must be here to.
All right, thank you. I think we're ready to go. The application is, can I request that Mr. Nugent takes this place in public participation payment? Okay, thank you. Call you in the presentation as well. The application is the Pavilion, Castle Green, Castle Street, Hereford. Proposal to renovate and improve the existing pavilion building on Castle Green to remove non-sympathetic 20th century additions to replace with modern community-focused multi-functional spaces, improved youth canoe facilities and reinstate historic pediment and portico. Mr. Rowles, make the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. This is a planning and listed building consent application related to the pavilion building at Castle Green in Hereford, adjacent to the River Wye. The site location is indicated by the red star on the plan. The application is reported to committee as it's a council-owned building. The chair has helpfully run through the proposal description, so I won't repeat that. But if we can move on to the slide, next slide, please. Okay, so the top part of that slide, the site area is edged in red, taking in land right up to the river's edge. The building is grade 2 listed, and the designation encompasses the wider building known as Castle Cliff, which is 14 and 16 Key Street. It lies in the central conservation area and sits on the periphery of the Hereford Castle Scheduled Ancient Monument. I should also point out that the Nelson Monument in the centre of the Castle Green there is also a grade 2 listed building, and the River Wye, as you can see there, is a special area of conservation, which is a European designation, and nationally it's also designated as a site of special scientific interest. The aerial image at the bottom simply gives you a feel for the natural riverside quality of the space at Castle Green. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the proposed site plan, which indicates the existing access steps down to the river would be retained. The most prominent part of the works is the cafe extension. So if you see within that red edged area, that's the bit southeast of that. The reinstated portico and pediment lies just beyond that. And that would beneficially involve the removal of an unsightly flat roof dormer and restore a more classical appearance. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next 3 slides just show you the proposed floor plans at basement, ground and first floor level. On this basement slide, you can see the canoe storage space and kayaks for the canoe club. You can see that it says platform stroke chute, so that's for the getting access to the river with the canoes. There's changing rooms and a plant room that some of the members would have seen on the site visit yesterday. Next slide, please. That's the ground floor. So you can see the functional or flexible function space and cafe seating there on the right. There's an accessible WC, there's a lift, so provision has been made for accessibility within the building. The other point I wanted to make is in terms of that addition that you can see on the right hand side of the floor plan. In conjunction with the architect, we've managed to secure a lightweight glazed link, which sort of achieves a degree of separation between that modern addition, and it helps us retain some of the visual importance of that Georgian facade from part of the building, which is described there as the river room. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is upper floor. You can see there's obviously meeting room space within the original building. The artist room will be an important space for the hire, etc. And then you can often see the roof terrace atop the cafe. Yeah, so I think that will provide for enjoyment of the tranquil riverside setting. Okay, next slide, please. So these are probably the best to illustrate what the proposal is. That is this cafe area. You can see the copper cladding, but also importantly the use of a large amount of glazing to retain some views through to that facade that I've described, and also through to the wide bridge there in the background, which is another listed building. Next slide, please. Okay, so then these next two slides just show how this portico infill, which is I'll show you on one of the existing photos in a bit, would be removed and opened up with glazing, and then the pediment roof reinstated. This is a heritage benefit of the proposal. We just go to the next slide, that might give you a slightly better feel. So yes, as you can see, that gives a much better sense of the historic appearance, I guess, of that part of the building, and it'll be a much more harmonious relationship to the other historic parts of the building. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is obviously a riverside aspect. You can see the use of stone at the basement level there, steps down to the river, and that canoe chute that we described. Next slide. So this one is more from Victoria Bridge sort of aspect. Importantly, we secured a metre setback in terms of that stone wall at basement level, and just to try and push it back and perhaps retain a little bit more of the aspect of the original building. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next three are just photographs of the existing, hopefully to illustrate the, you can see the large dormer, flat roof dormer atop the portico there, and the lavatory block on in the brick element there on the right. So those are all sort of to be demolished, and I hope you'll agree that it will be an enhancement to the building in that aspect. And finally, last slide. I've just included this one just to show you how it looked before, I guess, 1927. So overall, I take the view that the proposal represents a balanced and well-considered scheme to restore the building, bring about increased community use, facilitated by the Friends of the Castle Green. The recommendation is for approval of planning permission and listed building consent. And in doing so, we balance the public benefits of the proposal against the less than substantial heritage harm cited by the council's historic building officer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now let's come to the speakers. We have Mr. Byrne has provided a written statement to read to the meeting. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Bruce Byrne speaking in support of applications 221, 224, 221, 225, Pavilion Castle Green as a local resident. Since 2005, we have walked Castle Green with our dog and wandered the face of the pavilion. We watched the local canoe club on the Wye, went in for an occasional meeting and wondered if it would ever really come back to life. With your vote of support, the vision that the Friends of Castle Green have created can be realised. Neglect caused by insufficient council funding has reduced the Georgian delight to a shell of its former self. And yet at the heart of the building, there is already a state-of-the-art plant room fully equipped for the future, and it's green. The building will change if you approve the plans. It will change for the better. It will become an asset to the community, to Hereford and to future visitors to our wonderful city. A cafe with an accessible rooftop seating area overlooking the Wye and Bishop's Meadow will complement the view from the magnificent Georgian Bay windows. In fact, by ensuring that almost the entire building is accessible, we will open up this Georgian gem to everyone. Some changes have worried people. Conservation is important. However, to cite conservation as a reason to not resurrect the pavilion would be short-sighted. We must save the best of the past and use it to inform the buildings of the future. The pavilion is too important not to save and give it new life. The plans open up the pillars, allow light into the building, make the floors level and give access up and down from ground level by stairs and lift. The council can help create a new building with outstanding facilities for all from a sadly neglected one. The old and new rooms will become valuable community assets. My own grandson attends live wire music sessions and will continue in the future with hopefully better facilities. The cafe is a masterpiece. It can provide a revenue support scheme to support the running of the pavilion, a feature sometimes overlooked. The views will be an attraction to many, locals and visitors. The pavilion will become a Hereford destination for many, provided that you give your approval. It has taken a long time to come to a decision-making meeting from the plans first going online. The time has come for the council to maintain their track record of looking for a sustainable future for the city. The pavilion will become a flagship green build, your approval breathing life into our neglected heritage and altogether making Hereford a better place to live and visit.
Thank you. And now I ask Mr. Nugent on behalf of the applicant to make a presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Alfred.
This morning represents a pivotal moment for the Friends of Castle Green, who are a voluntary group. We had the community asset transfer in 2018, and since then we've been working with Herefordshire Council and the City Council, and more importantly with our community within the city to develop these plans. The project, as you see it, is our best attempt to serve our community in the best way we possibly can. The architecture encompasses everything that the Friends of Castle Green are about, and also represents the aims and objectives of the Town Fund, which are a group of projects, as you know, to help to regenerate and rejuvenate our city. So these plans come to you with a plea to grasp the opportunity that's before us, to work with us in partnership, as we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, and to make this project come alive for our community. And with their support, we've had nothing but the best positive support from our community right across the city for this project. And we've been taken aback by how much support there's been for the project from the offset. The only thing we'd like to say is that throughout the process, it's probably worth noting our thanks and acclamation to the planning team for their constant support and professional advice through this process. As you will know better than we do, this process is sometimes tricky and long-winded, but the support we've been having and help and advice has gone a long way to help us to go through this. So thanks to them for their support for the scheme. And just this week, we've had the agreement through from the Town Fund ready to sign. So if we get approval today, we hope to be able to sign that contract agreement with the Town Fund Board and the accountable body, the Herefordshire Council, and then move forward with the plans very early into next year and begin this project fairly swiftly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The local member is Councillor Milne, and asking him to make a presentation. You'll have 10 minutes. Oh, can you return to the gallery? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Members, thank you for visiting the site yesterday. I know it will already have been very familiar to most of you, but it is still an important means of appreciating context and gaining orientation. Besides, you've got to see inside and the pavilion's state-of-the-art water source heat pump system. This is self-evidently a particularly sensitive site. Almost every conceivable designation covers it: listed building, scheduled monument, area of archaeological importance, conservation area, special area of conservation. It contributes to some of the best setting in the county, bookending the classic view of the cathedral across the river from Bishop's Meadow. It is particularly enjoyed from Victoria Bridge, as the Bishop's Palace and Coffee Pot are from the Old Bridge. The pavilion is substantially of the Regency period, when classicism was still in vogue, as it had been through the late Georgian period. Regency classicism tended to be light-hearted, the architectural order lacking the stricter scholarship of the 18th century. Designed as an instant at the end of the Castle Green promenade and an eye-catcher for the passing pleasure boat, it represented a taste of the grand tour for every man. But all this was spoiled when in the 20th century, much of the northern pediment was replaced by a clumsy clerestory, and when a lavatory entrance block was added without the least consideration of the form of the host building. The developments obscured the readability of the pavilion and were not even very well built. In recent years, the pavilion began to look rather tired. A scheme to address these shortcomings was badly needed, and the Friends of Castle Green are to be congratulated for their vision and their diligence with which they have worked and with their architect and our officers to come up with the scheme we see today. The scheme has the potential to be a huge asset for the county, with its much improved facility for the canoe club, with its refreshment room and terrace, and with its revitalized meeting, training and conference rooms. There are two approaches to delivering a scheme like this. You could design your new extension in the idiom of Regency classicism, emulating its materials and proportions and accepting its foibles. This might have produced another pedimented gable to the promenade elevation, albeit at a lower level than the existing pediments. Or you could make the very best of what there is, particularly by restoring the right-hand pediment and fenestration in this elevation, and do a contemporary scheme in contrasting forms and materials. The Friends opted for the latter approach and are, in my view, to be commended for it and for coming up with a cheerful and arresting design. It is the result of a great deal of thought and learned consideration. The great number of amended drawings and visualizations on the application site are testimony to the consideration Friends have given and their preparedness to make appropriate changes. The setback from the plane of the host building in the river elevation being an important improvement made during the process. It does, however, need to be recognised that the Historic Buildings Officer's objection on the grounds of harm to the significance of the listed building group and failure to demonstrate that local character has positively influenced the design scale remains. And there is therefore some tension with planning policies LD1 and LD4. The HBO is concerned about the impact of the lift and the form of the new portico fenestration. The HBO is not altogether averse to a contemporary design, but feels that it should be more subservient, perhaps smaller or in more muted materials. It seems to me the extension has been carefully designed both to link with the old and set apart from it, and that it does so in a way which gives a clear signal that the 21st century can be a period of architectural renaissance and a scheme which promises to be a huge asset to the people of Hereford. I look forward to the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Mill. And now we'll begin the debate. I have to say, what's not to like about this development? Councillor Box.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation and site visit. I'm so aware that a great deal of hard work over several years from the Friends of Castle Green and planning officers has been done to bring these applications forward to committee. The renovations to improve the existing pavilion is well thought out and good for the community, also ensuring that the pavilion will be secured for future generations. The pavilion, which is run by the Friends of Castle Green, is at present an underused, limited facility. The well-designed renovation plans, including a roof terrace cafe, will create a very welcoming, multi-purpose facility for the community. Whilst on our site visit, we had the opportunity to see the most impressive £150,000 carbon saving renewable energy heating system using the River Wye ground as its energy source. The Friends of Castle Green have worked tirelessly to secure funding from the government, from the Crowns Fund, Herefordshire Council and Herefordshire City Council, to name but a few. I can only applaud Friends of Castle Green on their commitment and determination to deliver such an important and exciting project in such an iconic building for the local community and Herefordshire. I shall be very pleased to support these applications.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be quite brief. I think it's an excellent scheme, and it's nice to know that Councillor Milner even approves of it. So I'm happy to second the recommendation.
I don't think there's been a proposal here.
I thought Councillor Foxton was proposing it.
Well, she didn't actually say so.
Well, I will propose that.
I'm sure she-
I will second.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You've got to be careful, Lisa. That's formally done. Councillor Norman.
Thank you very much. I think much of it's already been said. I don't want to go on. I think some very promising comments have been made about how carefully this has been designed. I particularly wanted to comment on the marrying of the old and the new, which I think looks absolutely fantastic. And as Councillor Stone will know, we're very proud of the marrying of the old and the new at Grange Court, a different sort of development, but a very successful way of, that's being done. So it certainly can be done. And I absolutely love the proposal for this one. And I wish it well. And the Friends who have clearly worked incredibly hard, and how nice to hear the compliments to our planning team as well. It's obviously a sort of win-win all round, I would say. It is disappointing that the Historic Buildings Officer isn't entirely happy. That's his job, and it's important that he raises issues and they are considered very, very carefully. And I'm really interested to hear about the water source heat pump. Very sorry I wasn't at the meeting. I couldn't make it sadly, but clearly missed an interesting visit. But very pleased to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Are there any other speakers? I think have had anybody indicated? Indicate? Officers, do you wish to?
Chairman, just to the proposer and seconded for the listed building and the planning listers, because you will have there will be two votes.
Two votes, yes.
So this one, thank you.
Appreciate that.
It shows what today has shown. It shows the benefits of those pre-application discussions and the ongoing negotiations with officers. How well that those can come forward and come to a scheme which is before you today, which is I am also looking forward to seeing it rise out of the ground and hopefully visit it and have a cup of coffee. Thank you.
Yes. I was thinking exactly the same. I was thinking of a nice, perhaps not today, but on that summer day. Anyway, nothing else to know. Councillor Mills, perhaps you will start off.
Just going to say, thank you again, members, for coming around. I'm sorry, Councillor Norman wasn't among them, but we'll give her a special visit later. I know she shares my interest in renewable technologies. Debating, I think, neatly rounds up the mood in the room, and I don't want to delay it any further, and I'm happy, Chair, for the thing to proceed to the vote.
Right, then we'll move on to the vote. We have a proposer and seconder for the officer's recommendation. Can I ask for those in favour, please indicate. This is the first one. This is the planning
application.
That is unanimous. Yes. And now for the listed building. That's also unanimous. Thank you. Can I now ask the third application, Dylan Green. Dylan Plan, Green, Goodrich, Ross on Wye. Renovation and reconfiguration and site extension to create a modern family home. The officer is Mr. Joshua Evans, who's making his first appearance or presentation at a planning meeting. I'm making him nervous now. Because, we welcome him and look forward to this being the first of many presentations to the council.
Thank you, Chairman. I wish to thank members who attended the site visit. The case before members is presented to the committee owing to receipt of a redirection request made by the local member for Walford, Councillor Watson, has been granted owing to the level of public interest in the application. Please may I direct members and the public to the update sheet where additional representations have been summarised. The scheme is assessed against the development plan, which encompasses the Herefordshire Local Plan Technical Strategy, the Made Goodrich a Welsh Bicknell Plan, developed neighbourhood development plan, and the National Planning Policy Framework, which is also material consideration. The application site relates to within the settlement of Goodrich and is indicated by the red star on the screen. Next slide, please. Teilandre is located in the faded off top, the southeast of the residential cul-de-sac within the settlement of Goodrich. The extent of the site is shown within the red edge. The site is located within the Wye Valley AOMB with several historic assets within the facility. These are fully identified within the report, but one must know that to the southwest is the Grade 2 listed Goodrich House, and to the east is St Giles Church, which itself is Grade 2 star listed. Next slide, please. Teilandre is a two-storey dual-pitch semi-detached dwelling consisting of an eclectic mixture of materials including timber, stone cladding, UPVC, as well as timber glazing to the principal elevation. Next slide, please. The slide shows a variety of images of the existing property. The property has one prior extension, which was determined positively to create porch access to the property, and this was approved in 1996. Next slide, please. The application is in relation to a two-storey extension to the eastern elevation of the dwelling. The proposed ridgeline and scale have been concluded to be acceptable within the locality as they are subservient. The proposal would have no adverse impact on the wider landscape given the established residential context. This is supported by the landscape officer who has offered no objection to the principle of development subject to the conditions within the path. The proposed design is contemporary and would represent an improvement to the host dwelling. Next slide, please. By virtue of its siting and location, the proposal would not have an adverse impact on Pantry Cottage, Coppertops, Goodrich House, nor Timbers. It is considered that the impact upon Coppertops could be concluded as no adverse impact with regard to residential amenity, as the proposed extension would be in line with the front garden of Coppertops, as well as the further mitigation provided by the well-established vegetation. With regard to the Timbers, it is considered that there will be no unacceptable overlooking of this property. It is recognised that the applicant will provide additional screening to the northern elevation. Next slide, please. The map on the left-hand side of the slide identifies the long-distance views identified within as being important within the NDP, and arrow 6 is the view from Coppert Hill, which corresponds with the photograph on the right-hand side of the slide. Your officer's view, supported by the senior landscape officer's opinion, is that there will be no harm to this view associated with the proposed extension. Notwithstanding this, and picking upon the particular concerns raised by some objectors, members are advised that the planning system does not protect private views, no views across private land. And whilst concerns are noted, the more localised impact of the proposed extension is not considered to result in any harm to any views afforded specific protection by the NDP. Next slide, please. The proposal has attracted no objections from statutory nor internal consultees. It is considered the proposal has been set in line with paragraph 8 of the National Planning Policy Framework, as well as the Herefordshire Local Plan Co-Strategy and the Goodrich a Welsh Bicknell Neighbourhood Development Plan. Thus, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you. Thank you for your thorough report within the document here and succinct presentation. Thank you. And now I'll move on to the speakers The first is a the Goodrich and Welsh Picknock Group Parish Council provided a statement. These convenes to be read to the meeting.
The parish council's original comments within their planning application consultation response still stand in their entirety. There is very strong feeling among both the residents and the parish council that this proposal will completely dominate both neighbouring properties and the area as a whole. It would represent a clear case of overlooking and loss of privacy for neighbouring properties and would be generally detrimental to the residential amenity. The visual appearance would be at odds with the current relatively sparse layout of small to medium family homes, with good sized, proportionate outside space around each property. The NDP clearly shows a need for small family homes, and this proposal would remove such a property from the parish housing stock. The NDP also states that development scale should match the locality, should contribute positively to the group parish's rural character. It should fit sensitively into the landscape in terms of scale, form, massing, and detail. The environs of the 5 listed buildings and the church should also be respected. Relating specifically to the Goodrich church area, in quotes, future buildings would need to avoid having a negative impact on the landscape and views enjoyed by existing houses. The sheer scale of this proposal means that it does not satisfy any of these most basic requirements within the NDP. For all of the reasons stated above, the parish council objects strongly to the proposal and asks that the planning committee refuse permission.
Thank you. We now move on to Mr. Rees has provided a video to play to the committee. Mr. Rees is speaking as a local objector and has 3 minutes to address the meeting.
Mrs. Rees.
Mrs. Rees, sorry. Yeah, she has asked for the drawing JW 1076/102C on the desk in front of you to be displayed. Have in front of you. Mr. Evans, do you? Sorry.
Play through.
Okay. Sorry about this, but technical pitch. Technology is wonderful, isn't it?
When it works. No problem.
Right, thank you. Right. Thank you. Now the agent. Mr. Watkins, make a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'd just like to start with by perhaps taking a step back to what the case officer has said this morning.
Could you put the speaker a little closer to you?
Is that better?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Turn it on.
Yes, I'd just like to perhaps take a quick step back towards what the case officer said. This is a very straightforward application in form and materiality. It's a side extension to an existing dwelling. I'd just like to perhaps just quickly point to 6 short sentences that are actually in the case officer's report, which I think are of importance. First of all, at 4.2, the scale of the building is increasing significantly. However, it is retained within the existing boundary and will not change the overall character of the area. At 4.3, it is my opinion that the proposal would not result in harm to the setting of the church. A little bit later on, it's my opinion, therefore, that the proposal would not result in harm to the setting of the church and the neighbouring listed building. A couple more. The proposed extension is relatively large, but would not result in a scale of development that is conspicuously larger than other dwellings in the locality. And in this context, it is not considered that the proposal would have any adverse impact on the wider landscape or character. We have just briefly heard from an objector about distances and what have you, and it's worth just clarifying that 6.12 in the report, it says Concept is located around 28 metres to the south of T1 Dyer. There are no concerns regarding overshadowing or front area. Regarding the timbers, it's a similar dimension of 28 metres to the north of the site, so that therefore it would not be unacceptable. It's not an unacceptable, there's no unacceptable, overlooking to the property. And I think in conclusion, quite straightforward, it is considered that proposals are compliant with regard to all relevant planning material conditions. So I think those points there are quite succinct. I think it's quite clear that the aspirations of the local authority have been met by the design in terms visually and in terms technically in planning terms. And I think it's important that we have that in the back of our minds during this decision process. And obviously, the development has sort of raised a number of questions from objectors. But I think, as with all matters of design, it's very subjective, and obviously has created some emotive responses. But nevertheless, I think there can always be disagreement about design and what have you, but that doesn't necessarily mean to say that the proposals are unacceptable.
Fraser, I've got to end you there, so
Yeah.
the 3 minutes is gone.
That's fine.
Thank you. Now return to the public gallery. Right. Councillor Wilding is, William Wilding is acting as a proxy local member for this item. He speaks first and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate. He does not have a vote. 10 minutes time limit. Thank you, Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Chair. I won't take 10 minutes, I hope. I'd like to thank the officer for presenting that case and welcome to the planning committee. And it's good to see that you're able to pronounce the name of this house quite well, which has helped a lot of us, I'm sure. I've written it down, it's T. Clandre, so that's good. Okay, sorry, I'm even my 10 minutes here. As far as I could see from being there, there's two points to be made here, I think. One is the actual size of the extension, and the other is the impact of the extension on the surrounding houses. In my opinion, of course, the scale is perhaps a bit too great, but I'm not suggesting we should necessarily refuse it because of that. And I'd be interested to see what other committee members make of it, having stood in front of it. Of course, the parish council does object to the massive increase in size that this extension brings. And as you heard in their read out thing, they pointed to a couple of things in their NDP. For instance, it says the proposal removes a 3-bedroom property from their stock, replacing it with a 6-bedroom property, but you do need 6-bedroom properties, so I suppose that's a bit of either or. They also talk about the views and the fact that the NDP does have a section 14 where they're asking for due regard to village design and the amenity of adjacent properties to be taken into account, but as this committee is well aware, views aren't, you don't own a view. So again, that's a question that members will have to balance out. The only thing I think really is that I would have liked to have seen this design take more account of ecological impact. I mean, basically, I just want 2 or 3 stories on the side of an existing house, without really taking into account the climate emergency that's coming. I would have liked to have seen it address some of those things a little bit more, and then we'd have felt that it was a building that was actually adding to the local area rather than just obscuring the view from across the road. Obviously, it's providing a home for people, and that is great. But those people are going to have to put up with massive disruption in the coming years, and it would have liked to have seen a modern building taking account of that. So I welcome the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilding. Now we'll move on to the debate. Speakers. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. No doubt the site visit yesterday was extremely informative. It is, as has been said, quite a substantial extension on a large curtilage. The ridge height is going to be a little lower than I understand than the existing house. And I have to say that I could not see that it would impact on either the listed building next door, which is much higher up, or even the church. All you could see was the church spire, actually. There was a fairly substantial hedgerow, even in November. It was fairly thick and bushy. There was a fairly substantial hedgerow dividing the bottom of the garden of the existing house and the church. As the ward member, the proxy ward member, I beg his pardon, has said, you have no right to a view in planning terms. So I would have to say that I would agree with the officer's recommendation and move that we accept it.
Okay. That we have a proposal. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hannah. Right, any other speakers?
I will say a few words, Chairman. I think it was a very valuable site visit yesterday to actually gather information with regards to the size of the proposal, plus the actual curtilage of the premises itself. And also it gave us a fuller understanding of the relationship with the listed buildings. I think that looking at it from certain angles, especially with Goodrich House as a backdrop, Goodrich House itself is a very dominant building on higher ground, and although this extension will be quite a substantial extension, I think in relationship to quite a few of the existing buildings around there, I didn't feel that it was out of proportion, so I'm more than happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harding, sorry I called you Councillor Harrington. It's the beard, yes. And the stature. Any other speakers? Councillor Norman.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak. I couldn't get to the site visit, and clearly that was very, very helpful indeed. So I'm sorry about that. But I've listened to the comments made by people who were there. It does seem as if the concerns of residents are not really things which planning can address. As we've heard, you don't own a view. But I totally understand their concerns. The extension of this, it does seem quite substantial. But I just really wanted to echo the points made by Councillor Wilding about how disappointing that we don't have something of real quality, of sustainable build. You know, you have these opportunities and it just seems a shame not to take them up. Not a reason for refusing them, unfortunately, but I would just like to make that comment. It would be good to have those sort of really carefully thought through, you know, build that actually is sustainable and is considering the ecological impacts in what they do. So, thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Mill.
I was going to echo Councillor Norman. Yes, it's NPPF 126, isn't it? We're encouraged to achieve sustainable and beautiful places. It's all often out of beholder whether one regards a design as well proportioned and articulated. And I mean, I have to say that looking at a set of drawings with every window in a different shape, size, and order is quite disturbing. And if designers would consider the articulation of form better, I think they might get halfway to addressing the concerns of local residents. So presenting buildings that are, let's say, this is something that is an asset, going to be an asset to Goodrich, which actually emulates or perpetuates the materiality and form of existing traditional buildings in and around Goodrich. I think would help its case enormously. Again, as Councillor Norman says, not sufficient grounds to refuse the application, but a general point of encouragement, NPPF 126. Let's have some really decent designs for buildings, and it just helps applicants.
Thank you, Councillor Mill. Are there any other speakers?
I was just saying.
No, councillor Lewis.
Councillor Harwood.
Sorry, did you want to come?
I did, yeah,
Sorry.
if I could just come back. I did fail to say that I think that the actual design as presented is a great improvement on the existing.
Yes.
I don't think that, you know, the 70s style that it currently is any of significant value then, and the actual design improvements will actually enhance the building. Thank you.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. It's a big extension, but it's a big house. We stood there yesterday and did the calculations. I think the 2 floors, it would be somewhere banging on 100 square metres. But saying that, I don't think it would be. It's a big garden as well. Curtilage, I think, is a trendy word, isn't it? I don't think it would look out of place. And as a couple of us have mentioned, it's not exactly the most beautiful building as it sits at present. So I wouldn't say anything's an improvement, but that should be an improvement. My concern would be, though, for respectful practice while the work is going on. That is, if we decide to give it the go-ahead today. It was described as a cul-de-sac. I describe it as nothing more than a slightly tarmacked dirt track here and there. And with all the groundworks that have got to go on there, and there's a few tons of stone and earth to come out of there, I can just see that that's going to be a difficult time for everybody who uses that little lane. But there are conditions recommended, so that hopefully will cover it. But I would always like to highlight that it's a very small amount of space for cars going in and out. And of course, everybody there, the moment you need anything, have to use your car. Thank you, Chair.
Right, is there anyone else wishing to speak? If we have a proposal in second, I'll ask now for the officers to make them.
Thank you, Chairman. Members of, I think the site visit yesterday was very useful. Members could assess the impacts that have been identified from local residents and the parish council. They were able to assess the relationship with the listed buildings, which the officer pointed out, Goodrich House and the church, etc. And the other listed buildings are identified as well. And their setting was not dramatically impacted because it's not just the fact that you can't see them; it's the overall setting you must consider. But it was quite clear from that visit yesterday. I think the members that were there and were able to see that. They were also able to see that the existing building, I'm sure the applicants won't mind me saying, is not a thing of beauty, and the not only with the extension which has been proposed, but also the renovation to the existing property as well, will actually create an enhancement to the built environment in this particular location, and that's been confirmed by the landscape officer and the historic buildings officer as well. We've got positive comments there. The extension is subservient in terms of its height, in terms of its ridge height and its eaves, so it meets the criteria that officers look at there as well. And the length has also been reduced by 1.25 metres as a result of negotiations and discussions which the officer has had with the applicants as well, which again has helped reduce its impact on the property. The other aspects we've got within your updated report, you had identified that there were slight variances in the measurements, but the distances involved from adjoining properties as well. I know 28 metres. It's actually 27. Well, we look at around 20 to 21 as being an acceptable distance. So then we're well in that outside that period. The building will be built to sustainable standards in terms of the latest building regulations. It would have to be, and I'm sure that the applicant will pick up the comments made by members today as well. The other aspect as well is that there will be an extensive opportunity for solar gain within the extension as proposed, because there is a significant amount of glazing proposed on the east and south elevations, so that will pick up significant sort of gain in that respect. So those aspects have been picked up as regards that. And I'm just, the debate has covered all those issues. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And now, hand over to councillor Wilding to sum up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, member, for that debate. Yeah, there's not much else to say, other than to echo once again that I hope that the developers will try and incorporate a little bit more environmental stuff into it as they go along. Solar gain's all very well, but you can't export solar gain to the network. And you know, I think all houses need to have solar panels so that they can actually generate and export electricity into the network. That's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor Wilding. And now we have a proposal with a proposer and seconder.
Sorry, Chairman. One point which did get picked up by councillor Rowe regarding the access to the light, etc. I note that on the conditions, we haven't got a construction management plan. It's rare we put it on for a house extension, but I think in this particular instance, it probably would be right to impose a construction management plan if the proposer and seconder are happy with that.
Yeah.
It will be a relatively straightforward issue for the applicants to submit that detail. But if you're happy with that, then we'll add that to the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, given the difficulties of that particular track.
Yeah. Okay, I confirm as well.
Proposer and seconder. Into that. Can I now move to a vote? Can I have an indication of those in favour of the proposal?
That's unanimous.
I think that's unanimous, so I don't need to ask for against or abstentions. Right, can we now ask that we thank you all for coming to the meeting this morning. Rare for us to finish within the morning.